Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be, and welcome to a post on my fictional work, a novel I'm developing. This one's called Fictional Inquisition. I woke up this morning trying to forget about everything that's going wrong in the world by attempting to mentally reconstruct Picasso's Guernica out of US pop culture logos and cartoons. Then I realized that writing a story is a lot easier way to get the artistic bugs out of my system. When I feel afraid, I need a place where I can put all of my crazy, worried thoughts, and that place is in a fictional work. I think this keeps me relatively level-headed, despite all of the projections and visions I create about the future. And this might make me less susceptible to conspiracy theories. I can hold all of my worries in one place. Then I can prevent them from influencing my decisions about the real world. And these decisions require careful consideration, after all. You don't want to just run around like a chicken with your head cut off, crying that the sky is falling, the sky is falling. Personally, I may not like the people within the political system, but I think that the system's structure is worth protecting from the unelected international corporate powers that have infiltrated it at every level. I worry about those who want to remove, for example, traditional voting and replace it with lazy online tools or voting by mail. I think it's important that we remain accustomed to voting with our bodies when we go to a church or a school or a voting booth. And I think it is important that these rituals are preserved. I also think that even if you have a horrible president, you don't insist on his removal. You have to go through the basic election processes. And if there's a problem with those processes, we have to fix them by voting with our bodies. I wonder if the reason that so many conspiracy theories have taken root in recent years, I mean, this QAnon thing is really wild. I think the reason is that people don't know where to put their hopes and fears because they are not being reflected back to them in the form of fictional entertainment. When they don't see their fears given a place to rest, they float around and get attached to real-life narratives that are created about the real world in a sort of real-world role-playing game in which politicians and neighbors are all players in a great scheme to change the order of the world. And this is what I've heard about the online group called QAnon, and to me, it looks like a game that's gone further than anyone intended, and that it threatens the integrity of the political system and a lot of individual people's ability to understand what they see around them. I'm not saying that they're crazy. I'm saying that they've been given a set of information that it's sort of broken down their intellectual immune system to the point where they can't evaluate what they see. And that's a horrible state to be in. It's really hard to come back from that. And their friends and relatives really need to help. So to those who follow these sorts of theories, it may start out as nothing more than an entertaining story that resonates with their hopes and their fears. But when you lose the barrier separating your fears from reality, I don't know, it makes your life harder, and it makes the political system more difficult to fix. To maintain my barrier, my intellectual immune system, I quarantine my fears within a story. But for the story to be satisfying, I need a wild plot with verisimilitude, an attachment to reality, and it needs to follow from, in my case, the stories I've already written to continue building this world. And I will draw from real life things, like, for example, there's a company called Rentech, which is a $100 billion investment fund owned by a handful of mathematicians and physicists. What a great starting point for a piece of fiction. What if a similar fictional company were to launch an evil inquisition, eliminating those they view as a threat to their great vision for the future? What if they planned to bioengineer a population that died at age 50 and that believed in a history which they could write on the internet from scratch? Inventing fake history is far too easy, and without paper books and libraries, it would be quite easy to convince a population of just about anything you can dream up. This was the premise of my first novel, but my third novel needs more world building of this sort. In my third novel, there's a character named Mr. Randall, and he helps launch his future wife, a teacher of heresy, into the crosshairs of a dangerous inquisition. But he also has to save her from their assassins. He is an elite pimp, an ex-gigolo, and a secret agent for the crown. And his future wife, Mrs. Randall, is reluctantly drawn to him, despite his rather complicated and depraved history. She doesn't know about his true agenda, and he isn't even sure where his loyalties lie. He tries to keep her safe by putting her into a prison compound for people who know too much. It is full of ex-spies who have been traumatized by what they have seen and done. It is sort of based on that 1960s TV show. I think I put the name of it in the blog post below. While searching for a true history from her position within this prison, Mrs. Randall finds within the archives a story about how the gods of ancient mythology had actually existed at one point, and they were people with advanced technology who had sequestered themselves from the populace, with medical technology that helped them live longer and weapons that could strike people down like a lightning bolt from the sky. They ruled like gods, but decadence took hold and their control over the technology diminished as they turned into the inbred degenerates found in their pyramid-shaped tombs today. When she reads this story, at first she's not sure if it's real, but then she realizes that it was a story invented to replace history, and that there was a cult that had decided they wanted to recreate those conditions. And the first step was to deprive people of knowledge of basic science and statistics, reserving all advanced knowledge for a special few. This cult had decided that this was good for the good of the planet because they didn't like the cruelty of war or of seeing animals die due to human stupidity and greed. In this scenario, Bayesian statistics and complex computer models replace intuition and basic classical understanding. Instead of solving differential equations analytically, they rely on a neural net algorithm to solve them for them. People blindly trust what the computers tell them and do whatever their artificial intelligences say is best. All did not go according to plan because a person named Mrs. Randall, the future wife of Mr. Randall, and a pair of clever twins named the Gemini, who have erased the internet with a worm and replaced the cult's mythos with a more corporate model known as the Jabberwocky, a machine that relentlessly identifies and eliminates patterns within a system until it becomes the system. Because of Mrs. Randall's knowledge of what the Gemini had done, they end up wiping her memory and condemning her to everlasting life as an Ouroboros employee. Mrs. Randall eventually finds her long-lost daughter Protagora, who had been trapped in a bunker by a science cult that had been convinced the world had been destroyed by a gigantic space cloud. But by the time she found her daughter, her memory of her was gone. Her daughter finds and loses love after the bunker, and she finds her brother and someone who might have been Mr. Randall. But despite their wish to recreate a semblance of their past family, the memories are sparse and they resign themselves to lonely existences in a world where language is a dying art. This is all viewed through the eyes of a historian from the future, Alex Strange's daughter. And if you read my novels, you'd know that Alex Strange met Mr. and Mrs. Randall in the second novel of the series. Along with a romance subplot I've outlined in some other posts, I've prepared the bones of this novel. So all I have to do now is make it come alive. And I think that's what I will be doing. I ask, whenever you write something, it has to be, I think it should try to solve a problem. And from my perspective, I think a story like this could serve as a sort of inoculation against an effort to do things that I've described in this story, where if somebody tries to inject false narratives or false histories into a population to cause them to lose their connection to their cultural foundations so that they can be more easily controlled by the people who manipulate their memory of history. I think a story like that can help immunize or inoculate people from those sorts of efforts. And this may become important in the internet age, where it is now possible to control the sort of information that people absorb from afar. Whereas previously, if you wanted to control the sorts of lessons people learned, you would have to brainwash their teachers, the people standing in front of them in a classroom. But with online mass education, new sorts of attacks on countries are possible that can completely change a cultural identity within a single generation. And I think we need stories that can protect people from that, and I want to write that story. I want to solve that problem. So I should get to work, but before I do that, I have to finish this series of videos and convince you, the audience, that I can tell a story that you want to read. Okay, thank you for watching. Until next time.